How did a vampire video game movie open in nearly 1,000 theaters but vanish in just 2 weeks? How did its director get millions of dollars in funding thanks to bizarre German tax loopholes? And why did he pack a brothel scene with real people from the local nightlife instead of using actual actresses?
I swear to God, it's fucking pinker inside than Paris Hilton's lipstick.
This is the insane story behind the Bloodrayne movie. Welcome to Untold Secrets, the show where we take a deep dive into the world of video game movies. I'm your host, Patty Pixel, and today we're dashing into 2006's Bloodrayne film. If you enjoy this video and the content I make, please consider throwing the video a like and subscribing to the channel if you want to see more videos like this. Now let's get on with the show. The Bloodrayne movie released with a decent budget of around $25 million, but it stumbled hard at the box office, bringing in barely $3.5 million worldwide before disappearing from theaters. This wasn't just a box office flop, it was a full-on bloodbath. The movie became infamous for its chaotic production, bizarre creative choices, the way its director, Uwe Boll, managed to keep getting films funded despite failure after failure. The movie earned itself multiple Razzie nominations, yet somehow still spawned 2 sequels, and it lives on today as one of the strangest cult entries into the entire genre of video game movies. It sits at 4% on Rotten Tomatoes, and after watching the movie multiple times and doing a deep dive into its production, the story behind the movie and how it got made might be more interesting than the actual film itself. By the early 2000s, Bloodrayne had built a reputation for bloody gameplay, a deadly vampire protagonist, and enough cult buzz to even land Rain in Playboy magazine. So before we get into the infamous movie, let's go back to where it all began with the games. Bloodrayne the game launched in October 2002 for all the consoles and PC. Video game publisher Majesco rolled out its largest marketing push to date, branding the game under the tagline Lethal Erotica. Majesco's vice president of marketing, Ken Gold, he described Bloodrayne as infusing non-stop action sex appeal with weaponry and elements of the supernatural, going so far as to call it one of gaming's premier franchises. The tagline Lethal Erotica, it aligned with the game's identity though. A deadly seductive heroine with edgy mature theme marketed, targeted clearly at teen boys and young men. The Lethal Erotica campaign included everything from print advertising in gaming magazines, strategic cross promotions, extensive retailer support, and some very suggestive TV commercials running on national cable. One of its most wild promotions included Bloodrayne in the Bayou, a sweepstakes held by Playboy where the grand prize was a vampire-themed tour in Louisiana, a vampire-themed experience in the Bayou, including a date night with a Playboy playmate. This is weird. Many other notable companies like Sportsline and WWE Wrestling Company also ran promos where you could win copies of the game or tickets to events. All this marketing was received well, as the first game would go on to sell over 750,000 units. In the early 2000s, your game didn't need to sell millions of copies to be a success. Bloodrayne quickly earned a cult following for its gory combat, Nazi occult themes, and its femme fatale lead. The gameplay was a mix of hack and slash combat with fast gunplay. You played as Rain, a half-human, half-vampire Dampier, hunting down supernatural threats. Bloodrayne 2, the game released on October 12, 2004, expanding the story and cementing Rain as a recognizable franchise figure. Rain became a pop culture icon, even breaking into mainstream media. She appeared in Playboy magazine's Gaming Grows Up feature in 2004, one of the first video game characters to ever appear in the magazine. Rain also appeared in the comics, music videos on MTV, and cross-promotions that amplified her into statuses beyond gaming. All this success would catch the attention of director Uwe Boll. He had already directed House of the Dead in 2003, and after securing financing through German tax shelter loopholes, something spicy we'll deep dive into later, he went on the lookout for more video game IPs to adapt on the cheap. Around late 2004, Boll licensed Bloodrayne from Majesco. Majesco agreed to license the property to Boll, likely hoping the exposure would further push Rain as a brand mascot. Pre-production on the movie would start, and this is where our story really begins. So bite down because this shit's about to get weird. Our story now shifts to Germany, the land of bratwurst beer and bizarre tax loopholes. And it's here that Uwe Boll discovers his secret weapon, a financing system where investors could dump money into movies, write off the losses, and still come out fine. Meaning Boll got funding no matter how bad the movie bombed, and investors got paid even if the movie flopped, which meant Boll couldn't lose. That's where Bloodrayne came in, a franchise with just the right mix of sex appeal, gore, and name recognition to fit his formula. Once the deal was struck, Boll would quickly get to work on the movie. The game's Lethal Erotica branding and Playboy promotional tie-ins made it appealing to investors focused on visibility, not storytelling fidelity. and this was apparent right from the first decision. Bull immediately stripped away the game's signature 1930s Nazi occult setting, relocating to 18th century Romania. That was the first major creative detour from the original tone. Still, Bull sold the project as a dark R-rated fantasy action flick packed with gore and nudity, claiming it captured the game's edgy core and spirit, even though the story was nothing like the source material. Screenwriter Guinevere Turner later revealed that about 80% of her script was rewritten or thrown out entirely, leaving actors to improvise lines or just take a crack at it on set. Speaking on the actors, Bull went for name recognition over actors that would suit their roles. Christina Loken as main character Rain, and Ben Kingsley as the antagonist Kagan, Michelle Rodriguez and Michael Madsen as supporting roles to add additional marquee value. Casting happened particularly fast though. Reports from Ain't It Cool News and IMDb suggest that actors were signed within 2 weeks of shooting, drawn more by quick paydays than passion for the project. Christina Loken later admitted that she was drawn in partly because she was headlining a female-led action movie, but the rushed production and rewrites limited what she could do with the role. Ben Kingsley has since stated that he regretted taking part in Bloodrayne, saying in interviews that he just wanted to play a vampire at least once. Critics and fans often single his performance out as particularly checked out, reinforcing the paycheck plus playing a novelty role was probably the real motivator here. Rodriguez and Madsen both reportedly struggled with Bull's chaotic directing style and constant script changes. While Bull secured big names for marketing headlines, the lack of enthusiasm or connection to the material showed in the final product. With stilted performances and obvious disinterest from most of the cast, with the story and cast set and a $25 million budget secured, and filming planned in Romania's castles for cheap gothic atmosphere, Bull had all the pieces in place though. Casting big names and rewriting the script to fit his own vision, the stage was set for Bloodrayne to leap from the game screens to the big screen. Before we dive into all the production drama though, let's do a very quick rewind on the story. Having the basics on the plot and characters will make the behind the scenes chaos I'm about to cover way easier and more fun to follow. Alright, we're going to run through this part fast so we can get to the actual juicy bits, which is the production. The story of the movie opens in a traveling carnival where Rain, a half-human, half-vampire Dampier, is caged as a sideshow act. She slaughters her captors and escapes, vowing revenge on her father, Kagan, Ben Kingsley's character, who murdered her mother. She cuts through grimy towns in a tavern brawl, showing off her powers, then ends up in one of the film's weirdest set pieces, a brothel, where she wipes out a nest of vampires in a bloodbath of patrons and prostitutes. Rain learns Kagan is after 3 relics, an eye, a rib, and a heart, that grant immense power. She absorbs one herself, gaining strength and immunity to water, but tying her even closer to her father. The Brimstone Society enters the picture, vampire hunters who first chase Rain, then reluctantly recruit her. But mistrust brews, and especially with Katarine, Michelle Rodriguez's character, who eventually betrays her. The middle chunk is filled with fortress raids and dungeon fights as Rain and Brimstone clash with Kagan's forces while allies splinter. It all leads to Kagan's castle, a gothic Romanian fortress, where Rain storms in his throne room for a final showdown. The fight with Kagan fizzles compared to the build-up, but ends with her killing him. The movie closes with Rain standing alone, drenched in blood, caught between the human world that fears her and the vampire world she rejects. Alright, now that you've got the story straight, let's pull back the curtain on this production, because that's where all the juicy bits are. Trust me, the actual story of the filming and the production and the behind the scenes and this weirdo Uwe Boll and all his nonsense is way more interesting than anything to do with the actual story of the movie itself. Filming kicked off in August 2004 in Romania's mountains, using real castles like Corvin and Bran, plus the medieval towns surrounding them. With studio work in Bucharest, Bull shifted the story to 18th century Transylvania, and he even claimed that he was planning a trilogy that would hop eras, medieval to Wild West to World War II, to loosely mirror the game's shifting settings. This plan for sequels would actually unfortunately work, but those are stories for another video. According to an old Vanity Fair article I dug up, the Romania shoot was physically brutal. In their deep dive on Uwe Boll, they stated that the Bloodrayne shoot in Romania was less like a film set and more like a survival challenge. The cast and crew were constantly swarmed by clouds of gnats and stung by bees while making long treks through the mountains. Those commutes were so grim that people reported passing actual dead horses along the mountainside roads on their way to work. And even when they finally got to set, things didn't get easier. The live horses brought in for filming sometimes panicked at the sound of clapperboards or other loud noises on set, bolting mid-take and throwing scenes into chaos. Everyone described it as a grind. Long days in freezing castles, heavy costumes, unpredictable weather, and even the animals rebelling against production. In short, shooting Bloodrayne in Romania was gothic atmosphere in all the wrong ways. Despite the brutal shoot, Bloodrayne actually did dodge some of the awful CGI that sank Bull's other movies. Most of the action was done old school. Practical sword fights, stunt brawls, buckets of blood. That gave the violence a raw physical feel, but also made it look cheap and repetitive. Nothing like the slick fight choreography you'd expect from a $25 million production at the time. And while Romania's castles looked amazing on paper, the way they were filmed often came off less epic fantasy and more like community theater with swords. Director Uwe Boll infamously hired actual Romanian sex workers to appear as extras in the brothel massacre scene. Not actors playing prostitutes, but real professionals from local nightlife. As one source on set bluntly put it, rather than paying actors for nudity, Boll thought for 150 euros a piece, they would be naked and do what they were told. A much better bargain for our buck. This choice was widely mocked across the film community and even critics. One review noted that the move felt shockingly cynical, a cost-cutting measure masquerading as authenticity. A few unconfirmed reports claim that the cast and crew found this decision bizarre and unsettling, apparently finding the brothel sequence awkward and tone-deaf. I couldn't find any credible evidence to back up that statement from the cast, but the rumor pops up across multiple sites and forums whenever this movie is discussed. Another horrible choice among many would be the butchering of the script. Screenwriter Guinevere Turner later revealed that 80% of the script was cut or altered, with Boll pushing actors to improvise lines on set. Actors were told just to make things up, which explains why dialogue feels random. She also called Bloodrayne one of her worst professional experiences. According to Uwe Boll, Michael Madsen was frequently drunk throughout the production. His performance was widely thought of as lethargic and lazy. There are internet rumors suggesting Michelle Rodriguez and Boll clashed on set, but I haven't seen any credible evidence or direct quotes to confirm that. However, if you look at the type of actress Rodriguez is, tough, outspoken, and principled, she's comfortable with being shown off on camera, but doesn't enjoy things being overdone, and has turned down roles because of this, then it doesn't seem too far-fetched to think that she would have clashed with Boll's more exploitive, chaotic style of production. However, many shots of her like this made it into the final cut, so who knows? When reflecting back on the movie, most fans and critics remember the film less for its story or faithful adaptation of the IP, but instead remember it more for its wild behind-the-scenes drama, a butchered script, wasted A-list cast, bizarre extras, tax loophole funding, and the general sense of how did this even get made? So as if production wasn't wild enough, the release and box office side is where this movie truly cemented its reputation as being an absolute disaster. The release was a total mess. Hundreds of film prints were shipped out to theaters that never even agreed to screen Bloodrayne, literally like vampires showing up to a house they're not invited to. Most of them didn't even keep them, they literally just sent them back or flat out refused to play them. The rollout was such a disaster, it ended up being described by GameSpot as a complete debacle. Opening weekend pulled in just $1.2 million, averaging a pathetic $1,200 per screen. By the time its US run ended, it had scraped together just under $2.7 million against a reported $25 million budget. Despite one of Boll's widest releases, it still ended up one of his lowest grossing films. After the flop, Boll went after his own distributor, Romar Entertainment, co-founded by Billy Zane, accusing them of breach of contract. Apparently they promised 1,900 plus screens and never delivered, mishandling advertising funds, prints and promo costs apparently went missing, and withholding proceeds from the limited box office take. The lawsuit fizzled into yet another chapter in Boll's long trail of financial and industry controversies. Critic and audience reception to the movie was pretty much all the same throughout. Audiences hated it, critics hated it. It didn't suck blood, it just sucked. It holds a mighty 18% on Metacritic, only to be topped by its Rotten Tomatoes score of 4%. It shows up on multiple lists of the worst video game movies, received multiple nominations and awards at the Raspberry Awards show, Not the kind of a nomination you want to receive. If you don't know what that is, it's a award show for movies that get awards for the worst movie in their respective category. Even actors who were in the film, like Michael Madsen, would later come out and call the movie an abomination. He literally stated it's a horrifying and preposterous movie. A little harsh, but kind of trash. Critics trashed it, audiences ignored it, and the actors disowned it. But somehow, that wasn't the end of Bloodrayne's story. Rather than admit defeat, Bull doubled down and bragged about the DVD sales and even compared Bloodrayne to Underworld. As Vanity Fair and GQ later explained, his whole business model was built on low budgets, German tax loopholes, and selling international home video rights, a formula that made money even when his movies tanked. Despite bombing in theaters, Bloodrayne still spawned 2 sequels, Bloodrayne 2 Deliverance in 2007 and Bloodrayne the Third Reich in 2011. Both skipped most theaters and went straight to DVD in many markets. With Rain recast as Natasha Malf, these movies would have their own behind-the-scenes stories that deserve their own video. But I'll just say they went about as well as you think they would. Ironically, the Bloodrayne games outlived the films. The series got spin-offs like Bloodrayne Betrayal in 2011, and much later remasters Bloodrayne Terminal Cut and Bloodrayne Betrayal Fresh Bites in 2021. These help to keep Rain alive with a cult-like following that, just like me, has hopes that a proper revival for the franchise will someday come. If you ask me my personal thoughts and overall review of the first Bloodrayne movie, they would not be what you probably think. To keep it brief, I kinda enjoyed this movie. I had never seen it when it originally released, and being a fan of the games, when I eventually got around to watching it, I already knew what I was in for. I went in with the lowest possible expectations, hoping to at least walk away with a good laugh. Instead, I found myself enjoying a lot of the film. Despite the bad writing, or I guess I should say improvising, I'm a simple man. I like vampires, I like pretty women, I like medieval scenery and castles, I like sword fights. This movie had all those things, so I was able to take some of the good with the bad and ignore much of the bullshit. If you enjoyed it in a kind of a it's so good, it's so bad, it's kind of way, you know, it's so corny that I can almost look past it and enjoy it, that's kind of where I was at. And as I've rewatched the movie, I found myself cementing that same opinion. Bloodrayne is a bad movie by all measures, but it's a fun watch if you can keep your expectations in check and know what you're getting into. Okay, so that's it for this episode of Untold Secrets. I hope you guys enjoyed that. It was a lot of fun to make. On the next episode coming up, we have 2001 Lara Croft's Tomb Raider. There's a lot of family drama and all kinds of nonsense behind that movie, although the movie is quite kind of a banger. So stay tuned for that. And don't forget about our weekly show we have here, Screen Watch, which once that episode launches, they're going to be coming out weekly, where we're going to be taking a look at everything in the world of upcoming video game movies and TV shows. If it was a video game and it got turned into a movie, a TV show, an anime, I don't care what, we're going to cover it. So stay tuned for that, because there's upcoming things on the new Sekiro anime. The new Cyberpunk Edge Runner season has finally got some information come out. We got casting for the Street Fighter movie. We got new information on the Last of Us season. We got new information on the Fallout season that's coming soon. All kinds of great stuff. So stay tuned, hang out with me every week to talk about that stuff. Anyways, that's it. Before I go on rambling, I just want to say thanks again. I've been your host, Patty Pixel. Have a great day. I'm out.